Hello, hello. Welcome to Learn with Common Sense. We are delighted to have you. Please note that this conversation will be posted to our Common Sense Education YouTube channel, along with all the links and resources shared and discussed in our chat today. My name is Tali Horowitz. I'm the East Coast Education Director, and it is my absolute pleasure to introduce our guest today, Gretchen Pay. And, let's just jump right into it and get started. So, hi, Gretchen. Great to see you.
Hey, Tally. Thank you so much. So excited to be here.
Can you tell us a little more about yourself and your organization, Co-Teach, that you started and why you started it?
Yes. Again, Gretchen Pay. I am a mom of three. So this is my children's work right here behind me. I have a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And prior to founding Co-Teach, I was a classroom teacher, elementary, worked a lot in schools as a coach, and then worked at an education nonprofit for over, about 10 years, or almost 10 years. So I started Co-Teach because I was talking to a lot of families and a lot of parents, and people were just kind of like frustrated. This is during the very beginning of the pandemic. Like, their role had changed and they were excited to get to know their child in like this new way, but they were also overwhelmed and looking for resources. And so I was like, whose job is it to make sure that families are equipped and feel, clear and confident and connected when it comes to helping their kids? And I was like, oh, that could be our job. And so Co-Teach just exists to make sure that families have the support that they need so that they can nurture learning.
I love that mission. It's so incredibly important. Our audience today is predominantly educators, classroom-based teachers. And so what do you say or what do you offer to teachers who are like, I'm on board with this, but where do I find the time to do all of, family engagement, let parents know what's going on and so forth?
100%. When we think about supporting families, a lot of times it's like, oh, there's the direct work and working one-on-one with families, but really teachers and educators have such a big role in families in children's lives that it's our honor to be able to support them as they support families. And the first kind of thing when a teacher is like, Gretchen, I literally do not have time, one of the things that we think about is how are we using our time so that we can make better choices about how we use our time, so we're not just busy but we're being super efficient and effective. And so one of the things that I like to say a lot is like, we're broadening, teachers are passionate about making sure that all kids are served and making sure that all kids needs are met. And so family engagement is like a necessary way for you to ensure that you're doing that job. And the more you involve other people, the more efficiently you can do all the thousands of other things that you're being asked to do. And so all the teachers that I've worked with who've done it, and like you and I, we go back, like we're classroom teachers at heart, right? In our career, in my personal experience, in my colleagues' experiences, and now with all the educators that I work with, families who broaden the way that they serve children by bringing in the people who love them the most, which is their families and their caregivers and extended community, they are able to serve more children and serve them easier and more effectively because they've brought other people in. It's kind of like that quote we liked last time, like, if you want to go far, you go wait if you want to go fast, you go by yourself, but if you want to go far, you go with other people. And so that's the kind of thing with teachers. It's like, we're doing a lot, but if you want to go far, we got to involve other people.
Totally. I have so many different follow-up questions, but I guess my first one is I'm thinking about, all the different types of parents. And of course, when we say parent, that's an umbrella
Yeah,
term
yeah.
for any caregiver. But what do you say to teachers who say, hey, I've got parents who are like, you're doing great. School is your lane. I'll be in my
Yeah.
lane.
100%. And like, we just respect that, as a teacher, you just kind of like, I just want you to know that I am excited about partnering with you. So when we think about our mindset, sometimes that question's never asked. you know, what do you want your role to be? what's going on right now in your life, in your family. Like, how do you want this thing between like us to work, us being like me as an educator and you as a parent? And so just having that conversation is great. The other thing I will say is this past couple of years has been a testament to it. Everything changes so quickly, right? And so I think back in the day, there was like this idea that however the school year started, that's how it was. If a family or a parent or a caregiver were like, you know what, school is your thing, and I have this other thing going on at home or at work, I can't help you like that. Then in a teacher's mind, they were like, well, that's it, like for the rest of the year. But if we start to think about it, I just said I had 3 kids. Like my life was very different when I had a newborn, you know, but it changed dramatically when I had a 6-month old, you know? And so even if a family says that at the beginning of the year, definitely respect that, hear that, and check back in because things change, and you'll be surprised how many people are like, thanks for not giving up on me. Thanks for checking back in on me, you know? So I think that that's kind of one of the things too, is that it might be, but it might not be for the whole year.
I love that because I feel like that also speaks to mindset. You know, as teachers, like that's our mindset with students is I'm
Hmm.
never going to be like, this is who you are and this is all of you, what you're showing me
Yeah.
right now. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
applying that to families. And I'm thinking too about some of the strategies that I've learned from you, like
Hmm.
before parent conferences. So I know
Hmm.
a lot of us, we just had virtual parent
Yeah.
conferences. Maybe like at my school, we had 10 minutes per child. I know other places it might be a little bit
Yeah.
more, but I learned from you to go in advance with like, here's what I want to talk about. And I could
Yeah.
imagine as a teacher, you know, the teacher sending an email saying, hey, we have limited time. Please go ahead and list out kind of your concerns or anything you want to bring up with me. You can feel free to let me know in advance. You
Yeah.
know, and
Yeah.
those are some strategies I think that educators can use to engage with families. Are there other places where you'd say where to begin, you know, kind of thinking about that family engagement piece?
Yeah. So what you just said, like, especially imagine how a family would feel if, uh, you started your parent teacher conference and you're like, hey, I know when we checked in at the beginning of the year, you said things are kind of crazy and, school is kind of my thing or whatever. But I just want to let you know that during, parent teacher conferences, if anything has changed, like I'm game for that. And also I'd love to know what's kind of top of mind for you as we go into, these conferences so I can make sure that I honor your time and I hit the things that are the most important to you, as well as share some things that I've noticed about your child. The thing that you'll hear, that me and you both talk about a lot, the thing that you'll hear is just an honoring of that person and seeing that family member and a relationship with them as critical, not only to the child's success, but to your success as an educator. In the same way that, like, um, I think about this a lot when my children were little and I had to take them to their infant appointments. The doctor would ask me a lot of questions like, when did they last eat? How much did they poop? Da 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 da. Like all these things, because the doctor had specific expertise and I had specific expertise. And it's only when those two things came together that things really took off. And so I feel like the same kind of dynamic is there between an educator and a family member, is that they have expertise, we have expertise, and when those things come together, that's going to benefit the child the most. And so just keep that in mind as you start. It's not um, a nice to have, it's necessary, and to the extent that you're tenacious about relationship with your families, they'll understand that it really is an imperative for you to be able to do your job really effectively.
So let's get into it a little bit. I know
Yeah.
at Co-Teach you talk about kind of 4 key areas. So I think it's mindset,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
Vision,
Yep.
communication, and follow up. Can you
Yes.
break those down for us with the specific examples?
Yeah. So the first thing we'll talk about is just mindset. And we've talked about that a lot, which is just you just need to make sure that you are telling yourself and reminding yourself that there are other people who love that child, who are invested in that child's success. You see one side of them, you see one tiny aspect of them, and other people see other aspects of that child. And it's when everybody brings their piece to the table, then that's when we can start sharing and getting benefiting from each other's expertise for the benefit of that child, right? Parent engagement is not like a thing that you do. It really is the way you kind of function. And it is really oriented, not like a transactional thing, like, oh, let me call his mom or let me call his dad or grandma so I can make sure that XYZ is going to happen. But it really is like, I am invested in knowing the most important people in this child's life, and I am invested in learning from the people who know this child really well so that I can do my job really effectively. So mindset is going to be that first thing.
Can I jump in real
Yeah.
quick? 'Cause something else that you've shared with me before is when you're in that mindset, setting yourself up for success a little bit. So, for example, you mentioned, a parent call, and again,
Hmm.
we know teachers are slammed. There's a million things going on
Yeah.
in the day, but trying to get yourself ready before that call, so kind of you can match
Yeah.
where the
Yeah.
parent's at, or even potentially elevate them in mood. Can you share a little bit about that example?
Yeah. I mean, we were on a call one time and I was just saying, like, number one, you kind of take a moment to reflect, right? And so as a teacher, like, how am I feeling? Introverts out there, like, y'all are maintaining and holding a lot of relationships, so be easy with yourself. If you're going to do parent calls, definitely space them out a little bit to give yourself some time to kind of like quiet yourself. My school had their parent teacher conferences. It was like a Google sign up, and I was noticing all the conferences were back to back to back to back to back. It was like 3 to 3:15, 3:15 to 3:30, 3:30 to 3:45. And I was just like, man, right? Not only is that really, really hard on the pace with which you have to have a conversation with somebody, but that's also really hard to switch gears between so many different relationships and so many forms of communication. And so just consider what gives you energy, what takes away your energy, where you are. Consider your any baggage that you might have with regards to parent engagement. And then once you're mindful of that, use that information as you go into like your communications with families.
Great. Thank
Yeah.
you.
So like the second thing we're talking about with vision, and like I said, like me and Talia are classroom teachers at heart. And so when we were thinking about setting a vision, a lot of us are familiar with a lot of like documents. And so I was like, what's the easiest way to think about what you want your relationships with families to be? And it's kind of like those charts that we make at the beginning of the year. So when we're setting a culture for our classrooms, we say, what do we want our class to look like? What do we want it to feel like? What do we want it to sound like? It's the very same thing that you want to think about with your families, right? So you want to say, what do I want communications to look like with my parents and my caregivers? What do I want it to feel like, and what do I want it to sound like? And you kind of jot that down, and you can do that on your own. You can do that with colleagues, and you also want to do that with parents. Okay, you want to ask them, what do you want it to look like? What do you want it to feel like? What do you want it to sound like? And they will be surprised because nobody has ever asked them, most likely. They were like, oh, I just thought that I just did whatever. And so it might take them a little second to be like, oh my goodness, you care what I kind of want, but like you do. And they're going to tell you exactly how they would appreciate being communicated with, and how they would appreciate being treated and talked to and all those things. And the reason why that matters, because you might be like, oh my gosh, I can't respond to all those different ways. People are going to say so many different things, but it's actually more efficient, because instead of you go ahead and doing it however you feel like is the best way, and you're like, man, nobody ever responds to my weekly letters, or nobody ever messages me back in class dojo, or blah, 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 blah. Instead of those reactions, you actually can start from what they said they can do. Like if Friday's a bad night, or if Monday's a bad day to be sending out what's happening for the week, but Friday is better to let them know what's coming up for the following week, you can ask them that and they will let you know. And so I think that that's something that you want to think about at the very beginning.
And I think that works really great, especially for primary school. Like if you're the primary teacher in an elementary school, if you're in a middle school or high school, you could imagine trying this approach maybe with an advisory period or one class where you have a smaller group of students.
Mm-hmm.
And even I'm thinking potentially if you wanted to share these sentiments with, if you have 300 students, for example, you
Yeah.
might send out a notice saying, hey, this is what I'm hoping for. This is what I want our relationship to look like, sound like, feel like. And in certain situations, maybe make it a little bit less of a two-way if the
Mm-hmm.
number of students is an issue.
Yeah. And I mean, all of these things are just about being people too, you know? It's like there's a sense, I've seen it because I've worked along a lot of teachers at different points in their career, you know? And so some teachers have the thing where like they take off like themselves and they become like the teacher, you know, for the school day. And in their interactions with parents, maybe they're like this very distant professional. And then after they leave school, they're like somebody else, right? And really what this is about is like integrating the parts of like our identities and like I'm going to bring my whole self to this job and I want you to interact with me not just as like, you know, Naomi's mom or Lydia's mom, but I want to get to know you, Gretchen, and together we're going to figure out, you know, how to best help your baby. So yeah. So that's the vision. The next thing that we want to think about is communication. And so like starting by just talking to families, starting by just talking to parents and asking them how they'd like to be communicate with, or and sometimes they won't know if you just ask them like that. So you say, what's the best thing that a teacher's ever done to communicate? What's the thing that you didn't like that somebody's done to communicate? And that usually will get people's gears turning, like, oh, I really liked when they sent home this, or I really liked when we got a chance to come up to school and see XYZ. You're like, well, we can't come to school, but I might be able to take a video, you know? So there's ways that once they give you what they like and what they've experienced before, then you'll be able to kind of riff off that and you'll be able to get some ideas. The thing about communication is that you want to kind of be mindful of how long communication is. One of the biggest kind of realities of parenting is that we're just all very busy. Caregiving, it's just a crazy pace, as is teaching. And so sometimes like you want to make sure that the main thing that you're communicating is the main thing. And so if you are if you're a primary teacher and you're talking about reading, math, social studies, and science, what specifically do you want that family to walk away with, or what do you want them to know or be able to do as a result of your communication, right? And so it was not super helpful. Like this week, we're learning about solar systems. Like, okay, cool, thanks. You know, what do you want me to do with that information? What do you want me to know? What should my child know? Because families are excited to partner, they're excited to help, and especially coming out of a year where a lot of us were doing a lot of remote learning, they've been so close to their children's education that this year has seemed like this crazy demotion where they were very engaged and people were talking to them a lot and sharing a lot of information. And this year just kind of like fell off, you know? And so they're ready to work. So communication is the next thing. And then the last thing is follow up. And I feel like that's the most important thing, guys. There's a lot of one-way communication when it comes from educators and from schools. But once you have shared, oh, we're learning about the solar system and we're learning about the planets and you know, your child should be able to do X, Y, and Z, and we're going to do blah, blah, blah. Then what happened? You know, 2 weeks later, like we finished this unit and here are some work samples. Or like that's the kind of messages like we're learning multiplication. 75% of our class is now great at it, right? As a parent, that leads me to a lot of questions like, is my child in the 75 who knows it or doesn't know it? So then that's going to lead me to grades. Like, oh, okay, now I need to follow up and do some things here. Or I need to reach out to the teacher because I'm not quite sure. And so just closing the loop. And anytime you send something out, anticipating what's going to be my follow up, what's going to be the closing the loop of this is going to be critical because I've seen a lot of times, and even as an educator, just sent a lot of stuff out there into the ether, but never really anticipated what my response was going to be.
Yeah, I love your focus on the follow-up because even as I reflect, I feel like, as a classroom teacher, when I was in elementary school, for me, it felt clear and easier to be like, hey, this is what we're learning. And here's how you can, here's the types of questions you can ask your kids at home, which forced
Hmm.
you to really think about, to your point, like what's most important to me
Yeah.
and how do I communicate that in a clear
Hmm.
way, which frankly helped my teaching too, because I could
Right.
see it more clearly and simply.
Yeah.
Follow up. I feel like I always forget about the follow up, and that's such a nice way to be like, "Hey, I asked you for this, and you did it,
You
and it
did
made
it.
a difference." And that's like to me those positive phone calls home. Like Gretchen did so great today, so that if we have any issues later, we built that relationship and had that
100%. Yes.
positivity
Hmm.
in the
Yes.
bank.
And that's the kind of thing too, is like everything, I can't remember. I think it was like, I think somebody said it about Disney World or something like that, but everything speaks. The things that we say as well as the things that we don't say. And so when you invite somebody to a parent teacher conference, for example, there you invited them. If they don't show, how did we follow up? Did it just pass and they just like, yeah, they didn't come and we sent the report card home with the child? Or did we acknowledge and like, oh my gosh, I missed you. Like, is there anything that we can do to make that up? Like, are there any other different ways? And so there, sometimes the non-communication just sends the message like, actually, I'm not that important. And then so just keep that in mind, that like the things that we communicate to families as well as the things that we don't communicate to families sends a message about how much we need them and how much we actually see them as partners versus like other things.
Right, right. We're getting a question in from the audience.
Hmm.
Um, and this person's saying, I'm on board with family engagement, but many of my colleagues are less interested. How can I bring them on board and try to include this in my school culture? And I guess I'm going to add to that a little bit to say, kind of what's the low hanging fruit? What are kind of like, I'm just going to say it like this. What are the easy first steps?
Yeah,
I've got
yeah.
some hesitancy, whether it's I'm overwhelmed, there's so much going on. Like what can we offer this person to share with their colleagues?
Yeah. And so if we just think in general, and this is not parent engagement specific, but this is about any kind of change management because teachers are leaders. And so when we're thinking about like leading within your school context, you want to always begin any kind of change management with the people who want to change, right? So if you got people who aren't on board, your job is not to like bring them on board. Your job is to do you hard. Like do you in your classroom, create that little mini environment, and 9 times out of 10 the results will speak for themselves. Not only will you have a much more pleasant experience, and people will be like, how is your class, how are you so happy at the end of the day? How do you have more energy after parent teacher conferences? How did you not have any parents going off on you? Like all these things. And then it's like, oh, these are some of the things that I did on the front end, and I was very intentional about these things. And so don't worry necessarily about bringing people along. Like you can do you, and make sure that you have support, so that you don't, as you're doing all the positive things in your classroom, that you don't feel isolated and you don't feel like you have any kind of connection. So whether it's like an administrator, whether it's like a colleague at another school, whether it's like whoever is in your network, make sure that you feel supported so that you don't feel like an island, as you're doing the work. And then like I said, 9 times out of 10 your work will speak for itself and people will be like, what are you doing? And in terms of low hanging fruit at the beginning of the year, a lot of times we do like the little surveys to our students, like, what do you like, what don't you like, that kind of stuff, right? Asking families those same questions, you know and then when we do those beginning, because a lot of schools have procedures to do like beginning of the year calls, so that's definitely the lowest hanging fruit. A phone call is a big deal. Like just like a, hey, I don't want anything. Do you have 5 minutes? My name is Gretchen. I have 3 kids. I'm originally from Nashville. I'm gonna be spending a lot of time with your baby, and I just wanted to make a connection. You know, this is my number at school. This is how you reach me. Is there anything that you can think of that, you want me to know about your child? Anything at all? Like, what do they like? What don't they like? What kind of gets on their nerves, etc. Right? That is the lowest hanging fruit of all. That kind of call takes 5 minutes or so, and it is invaluable. It and if you can do it when you're not rushing, you're not doing your whole class back to back to back, because that feels weird too sometimes. But like, if you can do that, you can establish a genuine, a sincere, a real connection with another person. And that's what this really is all about. It's like, how can we be human with each other for the benefit of our children? So that those beginning of the year calls are the lowest hanging fruit. Um, Secondly, follow up is the lowest hanging fruit. That way you don't have to do anything new. you know, it's like if you send out a weekly report and you say, families, we're learning about XYZ, please talk to your child about whatever. Then in your next week, you be like, thanks so much for all of you who talked. I talked to 5 families this week and whatever. Like, even if it's anonymous, let your families know that like you are hearing them, and like there's a conclusion to the things that you're putting out there. So I think those two are probably like the lowest hanging fruit.
And I'm going to say with that survey or those calls for the beginning of the year, you could also do those right after winter break.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, as like
Totally.
a reset button too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
that's
Yep.
great. So as we're wrapping up, what are your final takeaways, Gretchen? Or anything you're like, man, I really wanted to say this.
I think the biggest thing is like we see you. um I'm not going to speak for all parents out there, but like parents see you. We see how hard you're working. We appreciate the work that you're doing. And parents are ready to be partners with you. um Maybe not every single parent at every single moment, but every single family cares about their kids. And as educators, you are the experts. And so, if change is going to happen in terms of the dynamics between a school and a family, it's going to start with you. You're going to make the first move, and you might have to make the second and the third move because maybe the person before you didn't, and maybe, like people have baggage coming into it. And so, you're going to make that move, and you're going to demonstrate to them, like, I see you, you're important, your child's important, and us working together is going to be the best thing for them. And so just know that this is not trying to add anything to your plate. This is trying to make sure that all the hard work that you're doing is continued at home, is magnified, is amplified, and that you feel supported. So in a way, I feel like family engagement and the way that I even respond to my children's teacher is like my way of showing like love and care to the educator, that I see them and then I'm partnering with them. And so I hope this doesn't feel like extra. This should feel just kind of like the baseline, as we work together and partner to serve our kids.
Yeah, and I love we're a team, that mindset too.
100%.
So I believe my colleague Jennifer has been popping in a lot of resources for a lot of what we've been talking about in the chat if you need templates, but also just want to reiterate, for more resources and information, you can go to coteach.org and find a wealth of information and knowledge. Thank you, Gretchen, so much for your
You're so
time.
welcome. So
Yeah, I
welcome.
really appreciated all the prep for this. And as I always say, I feel like I leave as a better educator and parent after talking with you. So
Thank
thank you.
you. Likewise.
And this conversation will be posted to our Common Sense Ed YouTube channel, along with the links and the resources shared today in our chat. We want to thank you all for taking the time. And as Gretchen was saying, really thank you, educators, for caring so much about our kids and making a significant difference. Have a good weekend, everyone.